Okay, I'll start. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to present my P2 topic, my work I did in my P2 during my BDS, and I submitted this poster to assets. So I'll first try to. Why is this turtle here? It's very weird, but we'll get to that. Let's start with the context and why and what is the whole project about. So yeah, so the context is I wanted to work on I wanted to work on therapy for autism spectrum disorder, and to give a context about autism spectrum disorder, it is a neurodevelopmental spectrum disorder, as in because it is a spectrum disorder, it ranges from high functioning to very low functioning individuals with autism spectrum who rely on the autism spectrum, and it comes with significant social communication and behavioral challenges. And therapy plans for autism spectrum disorder generally start pretty early on, right from preschool. So this is the overall context of the disorder. So let's first talk about what is a day in the life or a week in the life of a child with autism spectrum disorder and their parent. So what typically happens is a child with the autism spectrum disorder would ideally, and if he or she is enrolled in a therapy program, they would ideally have 2 to 3 therapy sessions per week, and one of them would be speech therapy, one of them would be occupational therapy, and these are different kinds. And apart from that, they also have school and other classes that their parents enroll them in, so that they get more acquainted with social situations, and that is mostly similar to any other child. And the issue that the main sort of highlight of how their day or week is like, it's pretty busy, in the sense that it starts with preschool, then there is therapy session, and every day there is some therapy session. Ideally, mostly it's occupational therapy, but on some days it's speech therapy. Speech therapy ideally is 1 or 2 times per week, and then evening they have these classes, and then parents are also working, so they don't have time. So I basically conducted a primary study with non-participant observations with while the therapy was happening, and after the therapy I used to conduct interviews with the parents and also with the therapists. So the primary study showed sort of gave me some insights. First is that children do not perform well in front of parents. That is because the authority that a therapist might have, the parents generally do not, because they spend more time with their parents, and because parents are more informal with them, it is harder. They generally don't listen to their parents, and because and parents conduct therapy in home settings, it's typically harder for parents. Children also often get distracted, and they also are very moody when it comes to taking therapy at home, and especially the repetitive nature of these exercises leads to a lot of boredom. So you get an idea about what are the key issues, and this sort of pointed me towards one direction, that is home training, and that home training seems to be a problem. And when talking to therapists also mentioned that home training seems to be really important, but compliance is really low. So I tried to understand what exactly leads to lower compliance rates, and this is where the the project sort of started. And I also got a few insights as to key parents wanted ways to integrate therapy in their daily life and daily activities, and that they wanted ways to make therapy more fun and less of a drudgery for kids. In fact, parents also came up with innovative ways to make therapy sort of fun for their kids. I'll not get into that right now, but those were, I mean, that sort of led into my design insights later on. So this was where the whole thing started, and yeah, let's move on. So narrowing down, so I decided, okay, I want to work on therapy because, and home training specifically, because this seems to be like an interesting area to work on, and this is something that probably would ideally need a response. So what I narrowed down. So if you look at therapy, as therapy progresses in the later stages of therapy, say in the second half, uh, the children have to engage in concepts such as prepositional relationships, pronouns, and time, which are typically abstract and slightly difficult. And using prepositional relationships especially seemed like an interesting topic to me, and it is important in performing daily tasks. So to give an example, if you ask a child to go to the kitchen and get say a spoon or something, so you're asking the child to go in the kitchen, so that is a preposition. And you're asking the child to say ki it is in the kitchen on the table, so on is a preposition. So in every daily activities, in any command, prepositions seem to have an important role, and a lot of papers also, a lot of research also acknowledges that. So so I try to understand what therapy techniques are used for prepositions. So discrete trial procedures are a type of behavioral therapy technique that is used for prepositions. Now, what does that mean? So it basically follows this typical repetitive sort of structure, and it is divided into position self training and position object training. Now, uh, so this is a typical structure. So a child is asked to perform an intended activity. So, no, so now this activity could be of two variants. First is position object, where the child is asked to follow a command like keep the ball on the table, versus there is a position self training, which where the child is given a command which goes on the lines of sit under the table. In the first, the child has to position an object. In the second, the child has to position themselves. Now this is how the structure is. So it starts with the command, and generally a prompt is given. A prompt would be to point at the table, or to take the child towards the table, or if the command is to sit under the table or keep a ball on the table. And these prompts are decreased over time. Over a period of months, these prompts are decreased, so that the child becomes more self-reliant and does not need prompts. Now, based on the child's performance, if the child is able to perform, the child gets a reward in terms of praise, or in some situations also food or sweets or something like that. And if the child is not able to perform, the trial is repeated with a prompt. And this technique is called errorless learning, where the child is not given any negative reinforcement. The child is only given positive reinforcements, and this has shown to increase engagement, and so on and so forth. Uh, so this is a sequence of, so this is a little bit too detail, but so this is the sequence of prepositions which therapists generally follow. They generally start with on, under, then they go on, in and out. And starting may it is just, so they chain prepositions. So the first time they would so in the first initial months, when there is, in the first two steps, they would ideally give only one preposition, where they would ask the kid to keep the ball on the table. Whereas as it moves forward, they would chain prepositions, in the sense that they would ask the parent to ask the child to go in the bedroom and keep the ball on the table. So there is in, and then there is on. So the child has to basically understand both in sequence and follow it. So it requires more cognitive effort and more understanding. So this is the overall sequence. I'll get to this later. So one important thing that sort of I realized through the primary study was that therapy sessions are for teaching. The clinical therapy sessions are for teaching, and therapy sessions at home are for practice. And practice is very crucial, because therapy sessions typically happen only once a week or twice a week. So apart from that, it is generally the parents' sort of job to take therapy, or conduct therapy for kids. So, and the major problem that was seen was in the home therapy session. As what? So I'll get to this. So why is this the case? Why is therapy at home so difficult? So repetitive and trial-based techniques work really well in controlled settings, and they are really good at teaching teaching the children a certain skill quickly. But generalization of those skills for them to use those skills in daily life, it is important for parents to take these activities in a naturalistic setting, such as a home setting. Only that leads to generalization of those skills. So and these repetitive trial based techniques are not well suited for home based environments, because there are a bunch of distractions. There is somebody's playing TV, or whatever. So it is sort of hard to conduct these techniques at home. So to tackle that, there are a bunch of naturalistic methods of home training, where I mean, let's not get into that, but there are different uh, sort of techniques that exist, which are more naturalistic in nature and are more suited to the home environment. But the problem with those, after talking to therapists and a bunch of papers, I realized that uh, so in those techniques, parents have to take on the spot decisions as opposed to the repetitive trial based techniques where the structure is very rigid, and parents don't have to know how the therapy works, they just have to conduct it. But when they are conducting therapy in a naturalistic setting and in the other in the other techniques, the parents generally have to take on the spot decisions, and that requires a certain amount of training on the parent side, and also they need conceptual understanding of how the therapy works, and that is hard when it comes to because parents generally don't have time for that. And even if and it and while some parents are able to do that, not most parents are not. And so and also it is also dependent on their education level, their involvement and stuff like that. So it's typically hard. So moving on, so why introduce play? I in the first slide I mentioned that introducing play in therapy. So why introduce play? So play seems to be an interesting way to approach this. It seems to be a perfect fit of sorts to address most of the problems that I discussed right now. So play has when an activity is playful, it has intrinsic reinforcements. It doesn't have extrinsic sort of external reinforcement. So the child wants to play just for the sake of playing, not because they are going to get a reward at the end. Also, play generally tends to have basic rules and a basic structure. Even so, and that's why it's, even though it's naturalistic in nature at all, it still has rules and structure, which makes it easier for the parents to conduct it. And and the goal, and in specifically in the activity that I would like to that I would go on to design, the goal was to minimize the decisions that the parents have to make, and hence so that they don't have to think too much as to how the therapy works and do not have to make on the spot decisions. So hence responding to these issues sort of through play seemed appropriate, and I went ahead with that. So with some intense ideation, blah blah, came up with a few concepts. So first was an interactive story, which was a 2D interactive activity. Second was a 3D tabletop activity, and third was a 3D environmental interaction activity. So in the first one, basically, it was a story, and to move ahead in the story, the cat would say that you would get a command that the map to the treasure is under the tree, and then you had to click on it, and then you can go ahead. Second one, there was a block building exercise where commands were given that put the castle on the rock or something like that. And in the third one, the third one started with and finally I went ahead with the third one because I did some sort of a strength and weakness analysis of every of each of them, and it turns out that the third one had the difficulty was there, but the learning was the highest because it generalization was the most, because the child was sort of engaging with their environment and the stuff around them. The generalization was higher and it had better replay value too. So let's not get into this. I'll directly jump on to the final solution. So then I basically decided to go on with the third one, and then I came up with two iterations for the same. First one, uh, so so over here, so in the first one, think of it. The first one is say the idea was that there is a cat who has run away, and your job is to find the cat, and the cat has left marks at multiple places, and you will basically go to each spot, and you basically get some sort of a beacon, and when you pick that beacon up, the beacon would say the cat was here, but the cat left and went to the bedroom. Then you go to the bedroom, and then you pick up the beacon, and then you get that the cat is gone into the kitchen. Then you go inside the kitchen, and basically you get these multiple chains. And so I basically, after expert evaluation, what came up was that this would require too much of working memory, and the secondly, there would be a lot of distractions in the house, and it would sort of defeat the purpose of playing at home, defeat the purpose of tackling distractions. So we sort of scrapped this idea, and the second idea was to make it very easy to have, say, like a complete object, break it into two parts, hide one of the part, and the second part gives you the command that the other part is here and here. So I went ahead with the second part, the missing half idea. So and the final concept was this clumsy turtle. So this was the final toy that I designed, and it was an interactive toy. So it has a shell and it has a body. When you press its belly, so when the kid presses the toy's belly, it plays music, and it has multiple sort of songs stored in it. And so this idea is borrowed from a very famous sort of toy that came up in around 2002 or 2003 called Singamajig. So where when you press the toy's belly, it used to play music. So it this does something similar. The when How does the therapy kick in? So what happens is that the back gets detached, and you and so you basically hide the shell, and you and the and you give the child the turtle without the shell. So the story is that the turtle has lost its shell, and the child has to help the turtle find the shell. Now what happens is so okay so this is the overall idea. And when so over here you can see the record button. What the record button does is, when you detach it, you can press on the record button, and the parent can record a message as to where the shell is hidden. If the shell is hidden in the bedroom on the cupboard, the parent can say that the shell is hidden in the bedroom on the cupboard, and then the parent can give the body of the turtle to the child. And now this time, when the child presses the belly of the turtle, instead of playing music, and because it's a habit now, because the child presses the belly to play music, the child would press the belly is the assumption. And when the child would press the belly, instead of music, there will be a command that I lost my shell and I can't play music anymore. uh, and and so the I lost my shell. It's in the bedroom under the bed, and the child now has to find the shell. So this is the overall map. So it is similar to and also to the one I mentioned. The child basically has the child presses it to get a prompt, and then the child has to find the shell. Now to make it slightly easier, as I mentioned that there are prompts that the therapist gives to make therapy easier for the child. The shell would give the prompts over here. The shell would make beeping sounds so that the child would it would help the child to find where the shell is. And and the parent can also help the child. So you can also select prompt levels. So the lower the prompt level is, the lower the frequency of the prompts, and the higher is the difficulty. So if so in the first when the prompt is at 1, prompt level is at 1, the the shell would beep, say, once every 30 seconds. But as you increase, it might when you take it at 5, it will beep, say, once every 5 seconds or something. And the higher the frequency, it is easier for the child to find the shell, is the idea. And basically the prompt level is set based on I mean, so basically I've charted out a plan as to how do you increase difficulty based on the prepositions that you choose, the number of prepositions that are there in a sentence, and the prompt level that is there. So you can go, so 5 would be easiest, 1 would be hardest, and you could decrease the prompt level to increase the difficulty. Once this level is done, you can go to the next level, and then next. So the rules of the game are that the parent is allowed to guide the child, but the parent is not allowed to point at the shell. This is because pointing at the shell makes it easier for the child to understand, but the goal is to for the child to understand the command, and not just find the toy through visual cues. But the child is getting auditory cues anyway. So the parent is allowed to break down commands, repeat the commands, stress on the prepositions, ask questions while the child is finding the shell. And the parent basically decreases this help over time and decreases the prompt over time, so that the child becomes more self-reliant. So the parent basically takes a role of a guide instead of an instructor. So in a typical therapy, home training therapy, the parent would have a role of an instructor, where it is a very school-like setting where the parent is asking the child to do certain things. Over here, the parent basically lets the structure and lets the toy take the therapy and becomes a guide, where the parent is helping the child go through the game or the activity. So why would it work? So because of the pandemic situation, I wasn't able to sort of validate it through some empirical study or any sort of testing. So I relied on theoretically arguing for its validity. So So there were three main reasons why I would argue that it would work. First is that it basically draws on the position self variant of the therapy, because the child has to go, because even though the toy is hidden somewhere, the child has to position themselves with respect to the toy, where the child, where if the toy is in the bedroom on the table, the child has under the table, the child has to go in the bedroom and then fetch the toy under the table, and then go there and retrieve the toy, retrieve the shell or stuff like that. So it is based on, I would argue it is based on the position self variant, and hence I would argue for its efficacy, because it's very similar to it, but it just adds play to the activity, and hence makes it more engaging. Third is that as compared to a meaningless activity, which is to just go and stand at some place, over here the child has some purpose. The child has to find the shell, retrieve it, and give it back to the turtle, so that the child can play music. So this adds meaning to the activity, which it lacked, I would argue, initially. And finally, it is based on it heavily is based on hide and seek and treasure hunt and games like those. And because those and children with autism and other children in general do like playing hide and seek and treasure hunt, and hence I would argue they would also like this. So now, so how was working on this different during the pandemic, and how would it have been different generally? Uh, I used more of a top-down approach instead of a bottom-up approach. In a bottom-up approach, I would ideally go and continuously test things out, go and observe children, and see how do they play, and then come up with a solution. But over here, that wasn't possible. So I went with a top-down approach, where I looked at theories and existing research, and then sort of deduced how can something be designed. And that's why I have argued a lot for its validity, and it's a very theoretical sort of argument. Whereas if I had gone and empirically sort of studied, it would be a very inductive process, as against this. So and I also based it on continuous feedback from experts. So I continuously talked to therapists and validated my ideas and my reasoning with them, and I would argue this increases its validity, and why I would say that it might possibly work, even though I haven't tested it. But I would like to test it in the future, and I'm probably going to do that. So let's see. Thank you.